What are hymns and why is it worth singing them as a church? On this episode, Aaron and I chat to Pat Sczebel. For many years, Pat was a part of Sovereign Grace Music, and you may know or recognise his song Jesus Thank You, which is his most famous hymn. At Gabalva, we love singing another one of his hymns, which is called His Forever, aka Jesus Friend of Sinners. Both are brilliant songs for the church, and we recommend you checking them out. Pat is the Minister of Worship at Midtown Church in Vancouver, and he also hosts the Gospel Coalition's Worship God podcast. So go and check that out. If you like this podcast, you'll probably like that one. More than anything, Aaron and I came away from this conversation just feeling really encouraged in Jesus. Pat's love for Jesus was abundantly clear. And on top of that, of course, there was much wisdom with regards to hymn writing for the church. So all in all, we had a great time, and we hope that you enjoy it as well. This is Hymnology 101 with Pat Sczebel. Hello and welcome to Hymnology 101 with me, Sam.
Me, Aaron.
And a very special guest from Canada. It's Pat Sczebel. Is that right?
That's right. Yeah.
Yeah. Good. Okay. You did just tell me, podcast listeners, but
And is that French origin?
It's Ukrainian.
Oh wow, nice.
Yeah.
I went for the French because
Wow.
there's a lot of French influence in Canada, but I was like,
Right.
it doesn't look French or sound French.
No.
Cool.
Yeah,
So it's Ukrainian. Nice.
Yep. Yeah.
tell us a bit about yourself, Pat. Like, how long have you been a Christian? What do you do? And also, where are you talking to us from today?
Sure. Oh man. Well, I met Jesus at a very early age. I was like 13 years of age. Lived in a little town in northern British Columbia. Population 150 people.
Nice.
And my brother had stayed at the church all night long the night before, and I was getting up to go to school, and my mom told me that my brother had really met Jesus and had a radical encounter with him, and I didn't want to go to school after that. It was like something just gripped my heart, and for the first time, raised in a Christian home, but it wasn't my faith at all. And at that age, it was like something gripped my heart. And for the first time in my life, I had a longing to know God. I wanted to know God and to, was just mindful that I can't live another day without Christ in my life. And although I'd heard the gospel all my childhood, it was outside of me. Anyways, and that little double wide trailer was our church, and the school bus broke down that morning because it was 45 below zero. It was freezing, and the bus couldn't start. And so I remember running home and throwing my lunch into the kitchen and telling my mom I'm going to the church. And just went into the little nursery because it was the only room in this trailer that had a heater. And so I turned the heater on and I began to call out to God. And my grandma, who lived across the street, came and joined me because she heard someone hollering in the church.
Nice.
Anyways, the long and the
Nice.
short is I had just this wonderful time. I felt called to pastoral ministry at that age. And then my pursuit was just, what does it look like to give the rest of my life to honor Jesus as best I know how. And so I went into the car business as a young man and became a car manager. I used to manage a car dealership and was just literally praying and waiting for God to open doors to go in full-time pastoral ministry. And I got a call from a pastor in Toronto, Ontario, that said one day, you don't know me, but a guy in Calgary had a dream about you. Said, like, would you ever consider coming to our church to And I chuckled and I said, well, I'm a car manager. I don't really have any formal training as of yet. And so he said, well, the difference between us and those who go to seminary is we need to read more books, is what he said to me. So anyways, ended up going in full-time ministry in 1990 and been doing it ever since. I think I've seen the good and the really bad and the ugly of pastoral ministry and politics within the church.
Sure.
I've been broken over and over again by my own sin and by many others' sin against me, and that can do one of two things. It can push you away from Christ, or it can make you run to Him. And I'm just grateful that I'm with you guys today, and I love Jesus more today than I've ever loved Him, and that's only His grace that has made me every time run to Him. And I love the church more than I've ever loved the church, and that's amazing. And what a privilege to serve the church, the people that Jesus shed His blood for. And so yeah,
amazing.
I have a wife. I've been married to her for May will be 37 years. We were kids. We were like 18 and 20 when we got married. And we have 8 kids, ages from 35 to 4. And some of them are biological, some adopted, and we foster some as well.
Amazing.
Yeah. And I'm at a church in Vancouver, heart of the city, called Midtown Church. And we planted it a couple years ago. And I was telling someone a few days ago, I feel like it's been some of the most enjoyable years of pastoral ministry. There's something about planting that's just vibrant and fresh. And in spite of the pandemic and all the crazy, it's been really, really great to just watch the Lord work. So,
wow. Thanks,
amazing.
Matt. That's great. That's good. We don't usually ask our guests, do we?
No, we did joke before the podcast. We said we should just do a podcast on your life.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, I got stories that make your hair curl for sure.
Okay, we'll do the rise and fall of Pat's life or something, and I don't know. We can do that.
Maybe
cool.
not that title.
No. That's the wrong trajectory, isn't it? Sorry. Matt.
Yeah.
Okay. Enough of that. So you write songs, right? Would you call it? This podcast is Hymnology 101. So don't feel like I'm twisting your arm here, but
sure.
What you do, is it songwriting or hymn writing? How have you thought of it in your head?
Yeah, I mean, I'm a guy who probably feels there's a place for both. I love old hymns. I love modern hymns. I also love places sometimes in a gathering where I have just sung, 2 hymns of just rich theology, just rich truths about who God is and what He's done. And I feel like there's places sometimes where we just want to go, and just sing something that's just simple, that just helps me take all that in and say, whoa, I just want to give you my life and live for you and love you in light of that. So I think I've written a couple that I would probably call a modern hymn, stolen bits and pieces from old hymns. And then I think I've written, just worship choruses that I don't consider myself to be a songwriter. By God's grace, I've been able to write some songs that have gone around the world, and I've been greatly encouraged by that. But I consider myself someone who loves Jesus, and He put a song in my heart. And usually a lot of my songs are on a walk where, tears are pouring down my face, and I'm just delighting in Christ. And then I got to get a phone and I sing a few lines, and it takes me back to my office with my guitar or the piano, and then sometimes I have to go and walk some more and worship and sing some more. So I know there's guys that teach seminars on this. That wouldn't be me. I often like Bob Coughlin has always said to me, he's a good friend of mine, but Bob has always said, you're an unusual bird in that you actually don't understand often what you're doing, and yet what you do is amazing. That was be Bob's words.
It's got to be nice when Bob calls you weird. Yeah, that's
yeah.
Well, that sounds like Aaron, especially the crying part. That's I'm sure you can walk in here and
what's he mean, like crying? Just crying.
You're an emotional, you're a Welsh emotional man, you know. And there's I come all stony cold, and you're just like, you know,
stony cold English man.
I was just thinking about Jesus today, and just tears. So thanks. But there's a song in our church we've been singing by you for a few years, and it's one Aaron discovered and showed me. Aaron, say what it is, and like, how did you come across it? And
so it's His Forever. I came across it, I don't know how. I was on Spotify. You know, on Spotify you go from one song to the other, and if you're listening to similar kind of songs, then they just crop up, and His Forever came on. I think it was on the T4G album. I can't remember which one. The third one possibly. And I just, you know, with all those men singing it, I was just amazing. And I was like, this is great. Great words, great tune. Showed it to Sam, and Sam was like, we got to sing this one. Just it's all, you know, all about knowing Jesus and being his, and him keeping us, and it's just great words for us to sing as a church. So yeah, that's how I found it, and we introduced it shortly after, didn't we, Sam?
Yeah. Like it was one of those that on first listen it was just like, oh, this is so good, and I can hear us singing it. It's very really straightforward and simple melodically, and very gospelly, you know. And I remember thinking, like, what is this? Is it like a new song, or is it an old song? I just can't tell what it like. It's really like intriguing. But can you like tell us about that song? Where did it come from? Talk to us about
such a long time ago. I remember writing that song. So I was prior to meeting Sovereign Grace, I was a crazy charismatic, like an extreme charismatic, I would say. And I felt like after 9 years of being a pastor, I heard the gospel for the first time. That's what I felt like, and it was amazing. And I started reading all the good stuff, the dead guys, and looking for every possible old hymnal, because I'd written a lot of songs prior to that I didn't want to sing anymore. And so it was like, okay, how do we get some good stuff in our hands? So, you know, combing through old hymnals, stuff on the internet. And I found this, it's James G. Small. He was from Edinburgh, born in 1817, died 1818. And the title that I took the lyrics from was, I Found a Friend, Oh, Such a Friend, was the name of it. And these are some of his verses. I found a friend, oh, such a friend. He loved me ere I knew him. So first verse, I took quite a bit from him. He drew me with cords of love, and thus he bound me to him. And round my heart still closely twined the ties that none can sever. For I am his and he is mine forever and forever. So I pretty much stole most of that verse. And then verse 2, I found a friend, oh, such a friend. He bled and died to save me. And not alone the gift of life, but his own self he gave me. Not that I have my own, I call. Not that I have my own, I call. I'll hold it for the giver. My heart, my strength, my life, my all are his and his forever. So I veered severely from that to giving us a verse on kind of what Jesus had done for us. And then I found a friend of such a friend, so kind and true and tender, so wise a counselor and guide, so mighty a defender. For him who loves me now so well, what power my soul shall sever? Shall life or death or earth or hell? No, I am his forever. So yeah, it was that starting point of like, you know, he loved me, he drew me with cords of love, and he bound me to him. So it was just kind of from that place. I remember taking the song to a songwriters retreat that year. That's with Sovereign Grace, and at that time they were doing an evaluation out of 50. And I remember Vicky Cook listening to me singing this song, and tears were coming down her face. And then she scored me a 50. She gave me a 50 on the song. And she goes, "That is the most beautiful song I've ever heard."
She did Before the Throne.
Before the Throne.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, that's quite a compliment, right? Yeah.
So I was like, anyways, it's very interesting that you sent me this email, because I don't think I've done this song for maybe 10 plus years.
That's the funny thing, isn't it? I guess.
So when I got the email, I'm like, oh man, forgot about
you like that song? Yeah. Because we do. Yeah,
we sang it last night.
We did. We actually. Yeah, that's right.
Service, didn't we? Yeah.
Because
was that planned, Sam, or was it just just happened to be?
It wasn't planned because of this. Me and Lee are planning we do an evangelistic service every Sunday night.
Okay.
And the theme we did was hell.
Okay.
And so I was like, oh, well, you might think, how does this link with His Forever? But it's the wrath of God that I deserved was poured out on the innocent, because it's interesting as you read the comparison there between James G. Small's original hymn text and then yours. It is like just a real inspiration for you, I guess. That first verse, you're staying quite true, and then you think verse 2 and 3, I'm going to go in this different direction, which is cool. I really like the idea that James G. Small, for example, would be like, yeah, you go for it, Pat. That's really cool. You're even thinking of, whereas I think you can encounter people who are like, how dare you? How dare you take that and try and change it? But we wouldn't be singing any of his words if it wasn't, for you doing that. Right. So
I think there's some that I would never touch, and you certainly would.
Yeah, no,
how dare
that's
you?
That's very true. Yeah. We're going to change Amazing Grace up. Actually, Hillsong have done that.
They have. But I know, like, there's like How Great You Are, How Great Thou Art.
Yes.
The old hymn. Me and my son Joel, we did a song called How Great You Are.
Okay.
Right.
And basically we followed the exact thing of, creation. And when I think that God is Son, not sparing, our verse was the Word made flesh, promised to the fallen, he came with power to save. The light of light was crushed for our rebellion. He died our death and rose up from the grave. And then the third verse is, what is the third verse on How Great Thou Art?
I think that is the third verse, what you just said.
No,
because the fourth verse is When Christ Shall Come.
When Christ Shall Come. No, that verse was me and Joel's verse that we wrote this song called How Great You Are. And it's basically the same idea of how great thou art, but we're not touching how great thou art. We'll just write a modern how great thou art. So you can do stuff like that. I think you're almost better sometimes to do that than you.
Thanks for listening so far to the podcast. Just a quick one to say, check out Gabalva BC Music at any digital music outlet or app to hear some of our own hymns. Also, email us if you want. We have all the lead sheets and chord sheets for our latest EP, so I'll happily send them over to you if they'd be of use to you or your church. Email me at sam.smith@gabalva.co.uk. Thanks. Now back to the pod. So when did you first start writing songs, and how has that changed, like in terms of like how often you write and the sort of thing that you'd write?
I mean, I think seasons of ministry and children It can be, it has ways of the last couple years. I just wrote something. Actually, we did a podcast with Paul Baloche on our podcast, and it was like, I don't know, it was it got me because I was like in a place of not writing for a couple years, I think.
Oh, yeah.
And I got off the podcast and I sat at the piano and like wrote a whole song like right after that podcast. And
wow.
But I think there's just seasons where, don't ask questions, just walk with Jesus, just love him. Sometimes the dark seasons is all of a sudden you'll just come out and then it's bang, bang, bang. You just start writing songs. But I've written for a long time. I mean, I think when I met Jesus at 13, I think I was writing songs. Like I was singing all the time. Everywhere I went, I was singing. And it probably wasn't, I don't even know if I got a cell phone until I was like, I don't know. I think it was 1993, maybe at the church in Toronto where we got a cell phone that we shared. It was like these big, huge block cell phones. We would share that among pastors. So I didn't do much recording prior to that, but all of a sudden when you got a cell phone, it was like, hey, I can actually record on this thing. So
how did you get into the Sovereign Grace thing? Because I guess how we know you a bit, I guess, is through the sort of Sovereign Grace albums and you being involved with them.
Yeah. I mean, coming out of the 9 years of being in charismatic churches, I kind of crashed and burned and said, I'm just going to find a little church that teaches the Bible and attend with my family. And it was in that place that I knew Mark Altrogi. I'm not sure if you're familiar with that name, but he wrote the old hymn, the old chorus, I stand in awe of you. Do you remember that one?
Oh, yeah.
Familiar with that?
I stand in awe of you. Stand in awe of you. Is it that one?
Maybe.
Don't know. Maybe
not.
Yeah,
anyways, he wrote a ton of Sovereign Grace songs as well. But he invited me in my crash and burn state to come to a pastor's conference that Sovereign Grace was putting on. And it was at that conference where I met Bob, and I basically left that conference. I told my wife flying home, I'm going to plant the church in Vancouver, and I'm going to steal their statement of faith and rip off all their materials and be a Sovereign Grace, a Sovereign Grace church, even if they say no. And so then I ended up attending their pastor's college, and Bob invited me to one of their songwriters retreats. And I think for first 3 years, just because I felt like my theology was so bad, I wouldn't dare write a song. And then it was kind of from God just renewing me in my love for the gospel that I think songs just came again. And there's seasons, they come and they go.
What was the first song you wrote then when you got brave enough?
Oh man.
Do you remember?
Well, that His Forever would have been like right there, because on that album, His Forever, a song called You Are the Way and Jesus Thank You. And Jesus Thank You was a song that I sent in, and like people in our church were lined up at the end of the gathering to say, who wrote that song? It was such a good song. And then I sent it in to Sovereign Grace, and Steve Cook was like, he said, if it works in your church, sing it here. And so I'm like, okay. And then I went to a songwriters retreat and I sang other songs that I thought were hits. Like this was going to be the next shout to the Lord. And Bob kept pulling his glasses down and going, do you have anything else? And I'm like, oh no, this is not good. And then I said, well, I have one more. So I sang Jesus Thank You. And he's like, that's a great song. I said, well, Steve just told me 6 months ago that I should maybe just keep singing at my church.
So
anyways,
cool.
I think, Jesus Thank You, You Are the Way, and His Forever were probably some of the first that I had written.
I didn't realize that you wrote Jesus Thank You. We don't sing it at our church, but personally, that's one that always helps me. Yeah, when I'm not feeling thankful for what Jesus has done, and just seeing what he's done again. And it has brought me to tears a number of times. So thank you. I didn't realize that was you.
It helps me. Like people say, what do you do? And what happens when you church sings that song or at a conference? And it does to me what it did the day I was walking and wrote it. I feel just that line of I was your enemy and now I'm at your table. I mean, what should that do to you? I mean, I think it should rightly move your heart to worship.
Is that the I don't know if you can gauge this, is that the one you think is most well known by you?
I absolutely just purely based on, I mean, just had a video sent to me from a soldier that was in Iraq that was on the top bunk, and the guy on the bottom bunk was playing Jesus Thank You before he'd go to bed. Wow. And the guy on the top said that he gave his life to Christ by hearing the gospel so clearly in that song.
That's amazing. Wow.
So you're like,
like what?
Had no clue. I wrote it for my church.
Yes,
and there was a real season where I was a little bit stunned that the Lord allowed me to be introduced to people like Bob and man, stay low and love Jesus, and everything you do it with the intent to serve your church and to love the people that you're with. And so many people are trying so hard to get a song heard or people to take their songs, and we're just, it's so twisted and so wrong. And I think if we have the heart to just do it, and we do it to the Lord, and if it blesses your church, and if the Lord wants to bless the larger body of Christ and take it to the nations, he has ways of doing that. He doesn't need your help.
He'll just do it. We were talking to David Ward and Eric Schumacher about Not in Me in the previous podcast, and they said something very similar. They said that the Lord just used that. They didn't plan for it to go as big as it did. They just gave a song into the Gospel Coalition album. I think it was on the Gospel
Songs
of Luke.
for the Book of Luke.
That one.
Yeah.
And that's the one that kind of Bob Coughlin took and just made it big then through the T4G conference. And that's actually how. Oh no, we heard it on the album, didn't we?
Yeah. Well, it's funny because that is the crossover, I guess. The Venn diagram is Bob Coughlin singing it at T4G, and I mean, partly just hearing a load of guys just singing it. I mean, straight away it's like, well, that's a congregational song right there, because you can tell, but and I don't know, the songs that he picks for that conference is like a very clearly similar motive to the ones or criteria to what we're looking for anyway. So no, that's great. So you talked with Paul Baloche recently, and that just sparked something off again. But why do you think for a couple of years there was nothing there, or I don't know? What'd you put that down to?
Yeah, I think in my age and my walk with Jesus, I feel like I don't get too high and too low in those moments. There would have been a time where I'd be all uptight and go, what's going on? Why can't they write a song? There's a sense of just being faithful and steady. And, I don't presume that I'll ever write another song again in the sense of, I don't want to feel like, because what's evident to me is when I get a song, it serves a purpose. It'll either serve a purpose of me in my devotional life. It'll serve the purpose of my church, or the Lord may choose to have it serve a greater purpose. So there's been bits and pieces, and the song in my heart is not left. But I think there's there can be valleys that are deep, that are difficult, where sometimes you're just calling out. I did an album with my two sons, If you looked it up online, it's called C to C, like a C and then the number 2 and then a C again, C to C music.
Mm-hmm.
And the album's called Revive Us Again. And on that album, I wrote a song called Speak to Me, which it's I guess it'd probably be a modern hymn, but it was just me kind of crying out, God, where are you? And going through a season with just some of our kids and real struggles and deep valleys, and sometimes just ministry and the care and oversight of shepherding a flock. And then, your family is, if I don't shepherd them and pastor them well, I have no right to shepherd and pastor the church of God. And so, just the heaviness and the weight of that sometimes. But I think in my age, I'm learning to just love Jesus and trust him. And if he wants me to write a song, he will. And if he doesn't, I'll keep singing to him and
yeah, cool.
him.
That's good.
You know what I mean? I think
that's good.
We can just get too worked up.
Yeah.
I know even with Sovereign Grace, being invited to their songwriters retreat has always been a thing. Like, I don't even want to go because I don't have a song. And a couple of times I have gone, and it can be, Lord, what are you doing? And why no songs right now? But I think the best part is just to trust that what I want to be found is faithfully walking with him and loving him and obeying him, walking in all that he's prepared for me to walk in. And so if it's not a song today or tomorrow or even for the next year, and if it is, then let me be faithful to do that. And
that's really, really cool what you're saying, and really helpful actually.
Massively helpful.
I suppose you do find, isn't it, with all these powerful songs, is that they don't come out of a place where you've planned it. They just come out of real life experiences. And some of the greatest hymns of old are exactly that. It is well with my soul. That's came out of intense suffering. And then obviously you go further back, and then the Psalms themselves are exactly that. It's just an outpouring of, Lord, where are you in this darkness? And I wonder if David and the guys singing the Psalms would have thought, these can be written down and put into the scriptures. But the Lord used them, and the Holy Spirit inspired them, and we sing them today. So crazy.
That's really good. That's what I think about the hymns of old. Like, obviously there was no internet, there was no immediate access to worldwide. Their thinking wouldn't have been, right, we need to make sure that the whole of America is singing. It's like it's so different, isn't it? So what do you think, Pat, with the hymns, songs that you've written that have maybe like gone a bit, lots of people sing them and you hear stories of that, what do you put that down to? What do you think makes a good song for churches to sing? I don't know if that's possible to pick apart, but what do you think?
I mean, if we think songs like "It Is Well," my sin not in part, but the whole nailed to the cross, and I bear it no more. Some of my favorite modern hymns are "Before the Throne of God Above." And Satan tempts me to despair, tells me of the guilt within. Where to look and see him there. And end of all my sin, how deep the Father's love. I mean, these are songs that they resonate with just this objective reality of who Christ is and what he's done in the midst of a subjective world, in the midst of our subjectivity, where we're like a sea that's just ebbing and flowing on any given day. We're flying from thing to thing, And but there's this one thing that remains steadfast and true and outside of us, and it never changes. And so I feel like having a diet of stuff like that. So the older I get and the more that I hang out with the church and with people that I have the privilege of serving, one thing I know is that I think it's Robert Murray McShane that's used to say, for every one look at ourselves, take 10 looks at Christ. Our people are doing exactly the opposite. They're they're taking 10 looks at themselves, maybe for one look at Christ.
Yeah.
And so what makes a good hymn to me is helping our people, creating a diet in a sense of spreading a banquet feast of feasting on Christ, who he is and what he's done, so that when my people come in on a Sunday morning, they're almost instantly more aware of the work of Jesus on their behalf than they are on the struggles and their failings and their sin. You know, when Paul writes in Ephesians 3:19, and this is from the NLT version, but at ESV similar, Paul says, "May you experience the love of Christ," when he prays. So there's an experience of it, and ESV says to know the love of Christ that surpasses knowledge. If I can be a means in writing a hymn, a modern day hymn, taking old pieces from old hymns, of spreading a banquet in such a way that my people come in belly button gazing, with looking inward, more discouraged by everything that's happening all around them, and I can create a feast where I can say, can you see him? And can you see what he's done for you? Then I think we're doing our jobs. And that's what I think modern hymns have to, it's got to be big view of God, big view of who he is, big view of what he's done. And it's got to overwhelm us by, I think, compelling melodies. Often we do one, and I think as someone who writes a song, I can think, oh, that is a great melody, and then someone else hears it and they go, so I've been like really challenging people and myself. Like sometimes I'll write 10 melodies, so I'll go and I'll walk and I'll sing something completely different, and I don't know why, but we just feel like, oh, we got the lyric, we got the melody, let's publish it. And I think the older I get, I'm definitely throwing a song out more to a larger, broader group of people. And I'm also sitting on it. Paul Balazs told me he's been sitting on songs for 10 years. Wow. And recently he did a song, and I think even the song that he did, Behold Him, was bits and pieces that was from, a very long time ago. And his wife at one point said to him, wasn't that something that you wrote like, a decade ago or longer? And he's like, yeah. So, tuck them away, hang on to these things. Every time you see a lyric in an old hymn that just moves your heart and your mind, you're just like, the truth of this is glorious, man. Write them down. And make sure that melody is equally as compelling as the lyrics. So I think that's where sometimes we just go, it's okay. Because the lyrics are beautiful, but the melody is not moving us. And sometimes the melody moves us, but the lyrics aren't.
It's getting a sweet spot, isn't it? In between is both of them need to be really strong. Amazing.
Thanks.
I wanted to ask you, maybe you've covered it already, but like, what is your favorite hymn? And maybe alongside that, favorite hymn writer. You might have multiple, but
well, I would say Augustus Toplady is probably one of my favorite hymn writers. This little book, I don't know if you can see it, Contemplations by Augustus Toplady. Just the opening here. This guy is talking about him. He said, various things are affectionately remembered about the eminent minister of the 18th century, ministers of the 18th century. The point that stands out in Toplady's life and writings is heavenly mindedness. His recently published diary reveals how close to the Lord he lived. His affections were set on things above. When the Lord first blessed him as a boy of 16 in a barn in Ireland, the subject was made nigh by the blood of Christ. Toplady tenderly described it as the day of my sensible espousal to the bridegroom of the elect.
Oh.
From that day to the day of his early death, he seems to have been favored with much felt nearness and communion with Christ. I mean, this book is just pure gold. But anyways, Toplady and now Why This Fear is probably one of my favorites.
Really?
That's why I'd be interested to hear your version.
Okay.
And the Sovereign Grace one, but his was called From Whence This Fear. And
Yeah.
And then I think my favorite hymn is It Is Well With My Soul.
Nice.
For sure. Yeah.
Good
Amazing.
choice. Talk about, like, you talked about melody a bit there. I don't know, what do you think is a good melody? Is it the je ne sais quoi? Like, who knows? How do you talk about what a good melody is? Or is there some helpful things that you sort of think in your head of what makes a good melody?
Maybe they come from the throne, from the throne room, and maybe when I think about just that, like Toplady, it talks about his communion and his nearness to Christ. Maybe do you feel sometimes like I get this feeling a little bit like all the modern hymns are all starting to sound the same?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, like, literally though, like we'll write ones that are like that, because
We've checked some out, haven't we? That we've thought that's exactly the same as that. We need to think of another melody. Yeah.
Like, I just got a great hymn sent to me, a modern hymn from a guy, and I was just challenging him. I'm like, you need to try some more melodies, and he's like, oh, but some people really like it. But in a sense, there was a lot of similarities to everything else, and City of Light. Like, I've really enjoyed a lot of City of Light, but I feel like sometimes they're
treading similar ground.
Yeah,
they've got a sound, haven't they? That that's a City of Light sound.
And I think I mean, God works through our personality and who we are and all that. So there is a sense where I think you could probably trace Pat Sczebel songs, everything that's been recorded, and go, there's a similarity to that too. But I don't know. But in terms of that fresh melody, I wonder that maybe we start with the mechanics, and we start with the musical component, and we start with what's familiar to us rather than being with Jesus.
Yeah, that's really good. Yeah, that's a really good point, because I think I feel, if I think in terms of mechanics, it will be helpful. And maybe I'll get a melody that is serviceable, that way. But you are looking for that. I don't even know what it is, like that thing, isn't it? That's just, what is that? For some reason, that is so good. Like melodies, like, I mean, we don't have our different favorites, but like How Great Thou Art, or And Can It Be, or A Mighty Fortress. It's like, why are those melodies so good? I don't even know.
Search people out and get as much input as you can. It's how you get better. People that crawl in the fetal position after they've had input about their song, and they're all broken and don't know what to do with themselves. I don't get that, because that's the beautiful part about being in a brotherhood and having people that are serving you to make you better at your craft, whether it be preaching, or it be leading God's people in worship, or whether it be writing a song. We need to say, hey, what do you think about this, and how could it be better? That's how we get better.
Yeah, that is really good.
Yeah,
nice one. Got any other thoughts?
No, I'm not the best at thinking of questions on the spot. I have to write them down. I've asked all my questions. Have you got any more?
No, I think that's cool. Yeah. It's been really, really helpful,
Really
Pat,
nice.
just talking. And yeah, it's cool because there's just some stuff you said that is like really sparking off some thoughts in my head, and like it's quite fresh ideas. So really been a benefit talking to you about this stuff. So
Well, thanks for having me on.
Brilliant. Thanks, Pat.
Yeah.
Thank
All
you
the
so
best.
much.
Bless you guys.
Thanks.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Hymnology 101. And thanks so much, Pat, for taking the time to chat with us. We really loved it. As ever, any questions, any comments, anything at all, feel free to email me at sam.smith@gabalva.co.uk. We'll catch you on the next one. Thanks so much.